I gotta talk about this new TV show that I binged and absolutely loved, and did not expect to love it, okay? I actually thought I was gonna pretty not like this show, but I was so pleasantly surprised by it. It's Ted, the Seth Macfarlane show based on the movies Ted and Ted 2, about the talking teddy bear voiced by Seth Macfarlane. And this is like a prequel to the movies set in the 90s. Basically in the movies, it's Mark Wahlberg as the human and Seth Macfarlane is the teddy bear that came to life. Kind of like, I guess, Toy Story style, but in Toy Story, they're secret about the toys being alive. But in this, like, Ted is a toy that came to life and like is known in the world and he's like sort of like a celebrity, but it's kind of died down, like no one cares anymore. And you know, it's Ted and this guy at high school. It's essentially a 90s sitcom made in the 2020s, and it's so nostalgic and it's similar. Like obviously Seth MacFarlane, most well known for Family Guy and of course American Dad, and you know he's done a bunch of stuff like The Orville, which is his Star Trek parody series, because I think he's obsessed with Star Trek and science fiction more generally. Seth MacFarlane's also like a big band crooner singer. Like he's done a bunch of albums as a crooner. Like he's really talented, and I think sometimes Family Guy gets a bit of a bad rap for just being a dumb show. And I know it's been criticized a lot on like South Park criticized Family Guy a lot. The Simpsons often takes friendly jabs at Family Guy for just being a dumb version of The Simpsons or a copy of The Simpsons. But I gotta say, like, I actually think Seth MacFarlane is really underrated. I mean, as a kid, I genuinely think Family Guy was some of the funniest stuff I had ever seen. And I never got super into American Dad, but I think American Dad was pretty similar to Family Guy. It was just a little bit more like, it leaned into a little bit more political comedy especially with, you know, American Dad. He was a CIA agent, American CIA agent, and his daughter was like a green hippie kind of girl, and the clashing between that. And then I think Family Guy in general was more strong in its like sketch style comedy in the cutaways it used to do than like the writing itself. Whereas like say The Simpsons was more like a show that had stories and heart and comedy in the writing, whereas I feel like Family Guy was really good at just doing funny, wacky sketch style comedy in those cutaways. And I think that was what was really good about it. So Seth MacFarlane always cops like a bad rap, but I actually think he's really good. And Ted to me is very reminiscent of Family Guy, because another thing about Seth MacFarlane shows that I think were always really just unique is that there were fantastical sort of elements, but they weren't considered really as such by the world. And what I mean by that is like The Simpsons is like a show that is grounded in reality and the rules of our world, more or less, right? You've got like the Treehouse of Horror episodes that bend that a bit, and some episodes bend that a bit, but Family Guy kind of is that, but then you've also got Brian, who's a talking dog, and like, but no one like questions that or thinks it's weird. Like everyone just sort of treats it as normal. And like, same as like in American Dad, like there's the alien that lives in their attic, Roger, who's a great character. And then there's the goldfish who can talk, who's like a former Norwegian skier or something whose brain got transplanted into a god. Like, so there's fantastical elements, but no one really thinks they're weird in the world. And it's like that in Ted, this new show. It's really refreshing, I think, as a sitcom, because it's not afraid to go against the grain of what is like popular in comedy right now, in my opinion. And I think particularly that dynamic that I mentioned in American Dad of the father and daughter, in Ted, there's like this father who's the quite conservative 90s father who's very much like, well, I go to work all day, so I should be able to come home and have a meal cooked for me. And it's very like that traditional household of like the working father, housewife kind of mother, and then their niece is staying with them, and she's very like woke, lefty, greeny, and there's a lot of clashing over that. But it's like, it's not presented in a way in which one of the characters is right and one of the characters is wrong. Like, it's not like you're never laughing at the dad for being conservative or the niece for being woke. You're just like, it's just like an interesting clash of characters. And I actually think it's really refreshing because often in pretty much all media, particularly in Australian media, like it's very clear that like the joke is on the old white conservative guy, right? That to me, it's like, it's actually, to me, it's almost lazy now how obvious a lot of these jokes can be. Whereas this one, it's not presented in that way. It's just presented as an equilibrium and you kind of make your own mind up, and both the characters are stupidly funny because of their opinions, right? That dynamic is great. But then you just have Seth Macfarlane as Ted and the kid who's playing the Mark Wahlberg character, right? Ted is just such a funny character. He's just such like, he just sounds like Peter Griffin pretty much. And some of the stuff they talk about, and it's very Family Guy-esque humor. Like one of the scenes, for example, I might try and put some audio in here, but like they're talking about the song, The Monster Mash. And like, there's this discourse around how the Monster Mash song that we know is a tribute to the song that the monsters in the song are dancing to. So then they write the Monster Mash. It's hard to get your head around, but it's really funny.
The song The Monster Mash is a song about a dance called the Monster Mash, which is based on a song called The Monster Mash, which is not the song The Monster Mash.
There's also a lot of just, 90s pop culture references, and it's, there's no mobile phones. It's very refreshing. Like it feels like a show that would have been on when I was growing up, like Malcolm in the Middle or something like that. It's like this dysfunctional American family that fights all the time, and then there's just a talking living teddy bear who's really, really funny, and like it's really politically incorrect. It really pushes the lines of that. But again, and I don't really watch Family Guy anymore, but occasionally I'll just like catch an episode because it downloads onto my Plex server on its own. So I'll just like put on an episode of Family Guy. And I do feel like Seth MacFarlane in particular has never been afraid to do offensive comedy. And he's definitely not super woke and like sanitized and like doing what he thinks is popular now. Granted, I don't think he even writes on the show anymore, but I think that the ethos of that show is not grounded in like what I feel a lot of sitcoms and television shows are now, which is just deliberately trying to pander to specific kinds of values. Whereas I feel like Seth MacFarlane's similar-ish to South Park. They're just kind of observing from a distance everyone and every perspective and just going, this is what's wrong with this side and this is what's wrong with this side. And they're not necessarily trying to force a perspective down your throat. They're just like saying, this is what it is, now you decide. Like, because we think all of this is stupid on this political spectrum, right? And I think this show is so refreshing because of that. But also it is genuinely just very laugh out loud funny. Like I actually think it is very, very funny to watch. And I enjoyed, there's only 7 episodes. I kind of hope they make another season of it because I just liked it that much. But yeah, just the writing, the performances, Seth MacFarlane, the voice acting, the animation is also really good. Like it really feels like Ted is there in the world. It doesn't ever feel like poor animation or anything like that. So really enjoyed that.